Folks, I'm excited about our next guest. You know, this weekend the Chargers face the Texans. I had to get Patrick Creighton, ESPN 97.5, late hits, ESPN. He also covers the Houston Texans for the Gallery Sports. So obviously I had to get him on and talk all things Texans. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. I just wanted to, I got to start here. Obviously last year was kind of a mess. David Coley's the coach, or Dave Coley, he's the coach. Deshaun Watson sits out. Just what was it like last year to go through that and cover the team when when a coach is only there for a year, and then obviously the quarterback's not really the quarterback. What was that like?
Mess is probably a really nice way of explaining what happened last year with the Texans. They were kind of in a very difficult position. You start off with Deshaun wanting to be traded because he wasn't happy with the direction of the organization. And then, we found out about Deshaun's dirty side, and that certainly changed the tenor of the fan from being almost pro Deshaun to being get this guy the hell out of here. And nobody wants to have a guy with that kind of thing hanging over their heads or that kind of reputation running their team, unless you're in Cleveland. So, but if I was from the city of losers, I would probably feel that way too. But as far as like Houston with not having Deshaun, and then you had Tyrod and Davis Mills, look, you had 30-something guys on one-year contracts. You knew it was very much a transition year for the Texans last year. And, Nick Caserio came into an organization that already inherited the problem with the quarterback, and inherited the problem with the roster, and inherited the problem with the salary cap. So you knew it was going to take more than just 1 year to clean up that mess. So they kind of had to get through that. 4 wins is probably 2 to 3 more wins than most people thought they were going to have last year. But it was evident very quickly. David Culley, very nice man, liked man, respected man, way over his head when it came to being the head coach. And, it's unfortunate that he couldn't grow into the position and that they had to make that decision. But it was absolutely the right decision to move on from David Culley.
And obviously now they have a veteran in Lovie Smith, who he's been around for a while. Very good coach, well respected. I love the beard. I don't know what it is about that beard, but I love that he grew that out. Exactly. I love it. But just talk about what he's kind of brought. Obviously he's a veteran presence. He's a guy who's been around the league for years and years. Just can you talk about what he's kind of brought to the organization?
Well, it's a different level of trust, of confidence, of organization. Lovey's been there. Lovey's done that. Lovey went to a Super Bowl with Rex Grossman as quarterback. That's almost Hall of Fame worthy on its own. So what Lovey's been able to do as a head coach, look, Lovey got fired in Chicago because he went 10-6. They would kill people to go 10-6 in Chicago right now. Yeah, he got fired.
Yeah, exactly.
Then he went to Tampa and had that team turned around, and they decided, we don't want to lose Dirk Cutter as our offensive coordinator, so we're going to fire Lovey and make Dirk Cutter the head coach. That failed really badly. So Lovey kind of got the short end of the stick at his last job. So I'm glad to see that he's getting another opportunity. Lovey's a good coach. And, I don't feel for him because you can see the frustration on his face. Lovey's not going to deliberately go out there and throw guys under the bus but you can see when Lovey gets that kind of blank stare on his face and all the emotion just kind of comes out of his voice, that's when he's really frustrated. And I think we're dealing with a little bit of that right now. But the players certainly, look, you saw, even though the run defense is there are not words that we can use on this podcast that are FCC compliant to describe the Texans' run defense right now.
But the Chargers' run defense is up there too.
They fight hard for them. They're just they're not. They haven't learned all their disciplines yet. I do think they are lacking in talent, particularly at the linebacker position, and they really can't wait to get Christian Harris back. But there's a lack of talent at the linebacker position, which is why your safety Jonathan Owens is leading the entire league in tackles right now.
Yeah, no, and it's funny. I mean, we should talk about Davis Mills, but the reason why I want to stick with the defense real quick is, man, Derek Stingley is one fun guy to watch. I love watching him at LSU. Now he's here. He's going to learn from Lovie Smith. I feel like, I mean, I'm not going to say he's going to be a Peanut Tillman kind of guy, but I feel like he could be one of those really good shutdown corners that's going to learn quickly. But I don't know what you've seen from him the first two games, and then obviously in preseason. But I think he's a special guy.
He is a very special talent. He is tremendously athletic and very smart player. He week 2 against Denver, he kind of got it put on him by Cortland Sutton and Russell Wilson. Now there were a couple of plays that he made were nice, but he got it put on him, and the biggest play of the game was 35-yard pass to Cortland Sutton on a 3rd and 16, start of the fourth quarter, where Derek Stingley not only got turned around once, he got turned around twice. And that's why in a cover 2 with Jonathan Owens over the top, Russell Wilson was able to find Cortland Sutton wide open on the left side for a 35-yard pickup. Cortland lost him twice. And look, there's going to be a learning curve, obviously. He didn't play a lot of football last year because of the injury. But that being said, I can tell you, having been somebody who came from New York, I've been down here in Texas for the last 9.5 years. Darrelle Revis' rookie season, people wanted him, like, thrown off the team. They wanted him, like, erased from memory. Revis was awful his rookie season. I don't have to tell you what kind of player Darrelle Revis became. So there might be a learning curve here for Derek Stingley Jr. As this season goes on, but I don't think it's going to be a full season. I think that by the time we get to midseason, we'll probably start to see a lot of improvement from Derek Stingley. I really can't count what happened last week because the Bears can't throw the football. So, but he does compete. I mean, every play he's going to compete. He's going to play hard. And like I said, I do think he is extremely talented. They didn't take him at 3 because he's not the goods. Nick Caserio firmly believes in him. The team does. And, look, we saw him play at LSU. He probably went up against better receivers in practice at LSU than he did in any game that he played in the SEC. So that being said, I do think, look, there might be a learning curve, and the Chargers have a couple pretty good receivers on their own, so they're going to be a tough matchup. But I expect he's going to battle hard, and they might beat him a couple of times, and he might make a couple of nice plays, and we'll see how that goes on. I think a bigger part of that is going to be how healthy is Justin Herbert, and how well is he able to throw the football, and if he's got all day to throw the football the way that. I know people look and say, wow, the Texans got a lot of pressure on Justin Fields. Well, the Bears' offensive line stinks. Also, Justin Fields holds on to the football long enough for us to sit down at a steakhouse and have dinner before he throws it. So it's a little bit different when you're going up against a guy like Justin Herbert, who I think when he is 100% healthy, he is definitely one of the 6 most exciting quarterbacks to watch in the NFL. He's got a great arm. He's extremely athletic. He's a really fun guy to watch, and it'll be a challenge for a Texans defense right now that's licking its wounds.
Yeah, no, but I mean, last year I don't know if you were at the game or I just remember that game last year against the Texans where the Chargers, if they win that game, they're in the playoffs. They clinch a playoff berth. They end up getting run over by Rex Burkhead for over 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I think the Chargers they have to have that a little bit still in their minds, that matchup from last year. But I was impressed in that game by Davis Mills, the quarterback. He was a guy that I don't think was talked about pre-draft. He wasn't really – I mean, he came out in obviously a draft where there was other quarterbacks. But can you just talk about his maturation and kind of how he's grown and last year and then going into this year?
So part of the frustration right now with the Houston Texans is that the Davis Mills from the last 5 games of last year, who looked like the best of the rookie quarterbacks from last year during that 5-game stretch, that guy hasn't shown up yet. And they're still trying to find him. And the reason it's frustrating is because going from last year to this year, Davis Mills played that well over the final 5 games with one of the worst offensive lines in the league, with the 2nd worst running game in the league, with 1 wide receiver, and with a defense that was absolutely abysmal. They were 31st against the run. They were 29th in yards per catch allowed when any defensive back was the first guy near the ball. They really were an absolute mess of a team last year. Yet he was able to overcome all of those things and play very well. He certainly outperformed Mac Jones down the stretch. Mac Jones looked terrible down the stretch.
Yeah.
This year, however, in a year that's supposed to have the Texans with a better head coach and a better offensive coordinator going from Tim Cully to Pep Hamilton, supposed to have a better offensive line. They drafted Kenyon Green. You were getting Laramie Tunsil back. You were supposed to have a better running game with the draft of Dameon Pierce, who's played very well, with the exception of putting him on the floor. But he's played very well. You were supposed to have a better defense. You were going to have a better defense up front. You're going to have a much better secondary. You drafted Derek Stingley, drafted Jalen Petrie in the first couple of rounds of the draft. You took Christian Harris. He's been on the IR, but he'll be back probably week 5. So there were a lot of things that were expected to be better for the Texans this year, and they haven't been. The line in the fourth quarter, for some reason, and this is really one of the great frustrations with the team, is nobody can understand nor put a finger on why in the fourth quarter the same 5 guys who play every snap of the whole game suddenly forget how to communicate in the fourth quarter. Why is it that Davis Mills, who is not afraid to throw the football for 3 quarters, in the fourth quarter turtles up? Because he didn't do that last year. In fact, the game against the Chargers, the Texans put up a lot of points in the second half. So why this is suddenly happening is the great mystery on this team. This is a team that legitimately should be 3-0. And they're 0-2-1 because in the fourth quarter, they absolutely go into a shell, and nobody can seem to figure out why. That being said, Mills made one really atrocious throw last week that resulted in the Roquan Smith interception. I know the ball was tipped, but that was a terrible throw from the word go. He never looked off the receiver. Even if the ball wasn't tipped, that was probably going to hit Roquan Smith in the hands anyway. It was an awful, awful throw. The one that he threw in the end zone was a tip ball that got popped up in the air and intercepted. I'm not going to say it was a terrible throw, but they probably was a different read that could have been made there that would have been a better throw. Those were 2 big mistakes by Davis Mills that resulted in a touchdown not being scored, and then the game-winning field goal being kicked. He was 20 of 32 for 245. Those aren't terrible numbers. He did make some very nice throws. He hit Chris Moore for a big 52-yard gain over the middle. So you can see he has the arm strength. He has the arm talent. He can make all the throws. Right now, for whatever reason, the decision-making is off a little bit. Also, Brandon Cooks was his number 1 target last year. But Brandon Cooks didn't play in the preseason at all. And their connection seems to be a little bit off right now. Cooks, uncharacteristically, has about 3 drops already, which Brandon Cooks usually a very sure-handed receiver.
Yeah.
He's only caught 13 of his 29 targets so far this year. He only had 2 catches for 22 yards last week. So they've got to find a way to reestablish that connection and get Brandon Cooks going. He's their best offensive play.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously, you know what game I actually did watch was that Broncos game, and it was so close. And at the end, I thought, okay, maybe Davis Mills will put the team on his back and he'll start making these throws. He was throwing it into the dirt, and I was kind of like, well, what's going on? Like, why can't you hit your receivers? And I know he had a lot of pressure on him, but it's like he leaves you wanting a little bit more. Like, you're like, come on, dude. Like, you're like, I don't know if it's just me, but I kind of wanted him to put the team on his back and end up beating the Broncos, because it would have been a pretty good story for the Texans, who had tied the week before against the Colts. I don't know. I mean, obviously, that's kind of what you're telling me right now, is that it hasn't clicked for him yet this season. But do you think that not upgrading the weapons kind of also has hurt them a little bit? Not getting him. I mean, I'm not saying premier weapons, but maybe upgrading, go out there and getting a free agent receiver or something, or a tight end or anything like that.
Well, you have to understand the Texans' salary cap situation with the trade of Deshaun Watson. They were extremely hampered with the amount of dead cap space that they have. I mean, right now the Texans have less than $1.5 million under the cap. They've got so much dead money from between the Deshaun deal and then some of the other deals they moved on from the Bill O'Brien era that were just really bad decisions. And that's part of the challenge Nick Caserio has in cleaning up the team is Bill O'Brien left behind a house that looked like it had been stripped to the studs, and they even cut out the copper piping. I mean, there was nothing. They didn't have draft picks. They didn't have salary cap. They had guys who weren't very good on big, expensive, long-term guaranteed deals. It's a lot to clean up. That being said, they did draft John Mechie III, who unfortunately was diagnosed with cancer, and he's going to miss this season. Yeah. So they did attempt to make that upgrade. They do expect Nico Collins to take a step forward. They expected Chris Moore to take a step forward. They signed Tyler Johnson after he had been waived by Tampa Bay, and Tyler Johnson, not a great receiver, but a good, solid wide receiver, but hasn't been able to get on the field yet because he's still learning the offense. They signed O.J. Howard after he was released. O.J. Howard had 2 touchdowns week 1. They brought back Jordan Akins, who's a guy who had been in their team for 4 years, so he pretty much knows the offense and the scheme and is familiar with a lot of the things that are going on. And he had a touchdown last week. So they are trying to make those upgrades, but they have to do it within the constraints of the fact that they don't have any budget at all. So it's trying to bargain basement shop. And I thought the picking up Tyler Johnson, picking up O.J. Howard, they were great moves because they're moves that don't cost you anything. And you get guys who have actual NFL, legitimate NFL experience, have talent, can add to that room. But they've got to acclimate them better. And they seem to be having a little trouble getting those guys acclimated. But look, this was always going to be a transition year for them. And yeah, you know what? They should be 3-0 right now. They absolutely should be. But realistically, I do think the Texans will be better as the season goes on than what they're showing us right now.
No, I completely agree. 2 final questions for me. One, what's the feeling around Texans fans and everything about Nick Caserio and the direction he's taking in the team? Are the fans kind of buying the vision and everything, or kind of what's your feeling on that?
I think overwhelmingly the fans have bought into Nick Caserio. Nick Caserio's earned it. He earned very high marks for his first draft where he didn't have a pick until the 3rd round. He earned very high marks for this current draft where they've got, Kenyon Green is a starter. Jalen Petrie is a starter. Derek Stingley Jr. is a starter. John Mechie III would have been a starter had he been healthy. Christian Harris will be a starter when he returns. There's a lot of guys that they drafted who came right in, stepped in as starting players. So for a team that has had a history of drafting very poorly over the last several years, particularly under the Bill O'Brien watch, they've had 2 very good drafts. They've been able to scour the recycling bin to find players who have been and are expected to be, contributors to the team. And look, they took Davis Mills in the 3rd round last year. Davis Mills came out after a COVID season where he didn't play very much and didn't have a whole lot of college football under his belt, but was a guy who was a very highly recruited player. And the assumption was if Davis Mills had stayed in college for another year, he would have been a 1st-round pick coming out this year. There is some development, however, that needs to be done with a guy who hasn't necessarily had a whole lot of college football starts. So every game this year for Davis is essentially an audition, fair or not. It's an audition because the Texans overall probably aren't going to be very good. They're going to have a very high draft pick, and they're going to have the opportunity to draft one of the top quarterbacks in this current draft if they want to. So it really is incumbent on Davis Mills to continue to progress and show that he can be the guy, or unfortunately for him, he's probably going to get replaced in the NFL draft this coming year. Now, he's shown he can make throws, and he's shown he can have command of the offense. We saw it last year. So it's trying to unlock that guy and get him on the same page with his receivers. Because again, Brandon Cooks didn't play in the preseason. O.J. Howard wasn't here. Jordan Akins was on the practice squad. They're trying to work around, the offensive line, I think, is still a bit of a work in progress. Talent-wise, they're better. But they are still a bit of a work in progress of getting all those guys to always be on the same page. And they don't have very much depth, as you can see by the fact that the offensive linemen, the 5 linemen, they play every snap. The secondary for the Texans, all 4 of those guys, they play every snap. So there are certain position groups that they do not have a lot of depth. And as much as whatever people might be frustrated with the fact that in the fourth quarter the offense has gotten bogged down and not knowing where it is, there are things that obviously can be corrected, and part of that is communication and part of that is confidence. So we'll see how long it takes them to get on that page. But I do believe that because of the work Nick Caserio has done, the fact that this team now has a lot more young talent, that people know about their talent level, they know what they're getting into. These guys are making plays. They're already starting. People are believing, hey, you know what? This is not an organization that now is being led by Tom McNair and by Jack Easterby. This is an organization that's led by Nick Caserio, and people have confidence in Nick Caserio that things will go the right way.
And last one for me, Patrick. What's your prediction for Sunday?
This is what I think is going to be another difficult matchup for the Texans. I know the Texans beat the Chargers last year, but that was in December. It's a lot easier to beat the Chargers in December than it is to beat them in September. I'm not trying to offend anybody, but history is history. And this is usually the part of the year where the Chargers will start to play pretty well. You've gotten through the first 3 games of the year. Now they'll get on their run, and then in December we'll hope that they don't do what they normally do. But they do have a lot of talent. And, Justin Herbert's an electrifying player. Austin Eckler is a great player. I got him in 3 different dynasty leagues because of how great a player he is. Austin Eckler's a terrific player. They've got weapons on the outside. They have size. They have speed on the outside. They certainly have the ability to put up a lot of points. And the Texans right now, you think about how bad the run defense is. They're giving up over 202 yards per game. Nobody else is giving up more than 157. And that includes the Bears and the Seahawks. So they're giving up 202 yards per game. Last year, the Texans were second to last in run defense. They were giving up about 145 a game. The year before, they were dead last. They gave up 162 yards per game. So 202 yards per game on the ground is some 1935 era type offense that the Texans are literally just in the game of Moses. The Texans are the Red Sea right now, and they're very happy to play that role. So it is very possible Austin Eckler could have a absolutely monster game on the ground. The Texans can't stop the run. And if the Chargers use any kind of like jet motion offense, which I always equate with high school, but if they use any kind of jet motion offense, we've seen the Texans get burned on jet sweeps, wide receiver jet sweeps the last couple of weeks. So they are susceptible to that. They showed a lack of discipline last week in maintaining their gaps, which allowed Justin Fields to escape the pocket and pick up big gains with his feet because they didn't maintain gap integrity. So these are things that the team has to work on. I think this is a game the Chargers could put up an awful lot of points. They certainly rack up a ton of yardage on the ground. We know they can throw the ball. So I do think that this is a very tough game for the Texans because of the balance the Chargers offense can bring. I think this is a game that the Chargers literally should be able to put up 30 plus points without a whole lot of trouble. And it's just a matter of, is the Texans offense going to be able to try to fight back and be able to put up points with them and make it a competitive game, or the Chargers going to win this by 2 scores?
Well, Charger fans are hoping that happens because Austin Eckler the first 3 weeks, it hasn't materialized yet, but obviously the Chargers are going to stick to the running game and try and run the ball. But you know what I love a big part of why I love journalism is for this. Patrick and I didn't know each other. I messaged him and I'm like, hey, nice to meet you. I'd love to have you on the podcast. He's like, yeah, sure. And this is a cool way to meet. I think this is awesome. It's awesome to get to know people from that you don't know from Houston or that cover other teams. I think this is the fun part of journalism. And Patrick, it's honestly great to meet you. And don't forget, he is Late Hits, ESPN 97.5. He also covers the Texans for Gallery Sports. Check out all of his work, and he's on Twitter at @PCreighton1. Patrick, anything to say before we head out?
Well, for now, you look like you're a little bit younger than I am, which is good for you because I'm old. But I'll tell you, when I was a young journalist and a young media person trying to break into this business, it was very hard to get people to answer your call, to respond to your email. Obviously, when I started, we didn't have the internet; it didn't exist. That's how old I am. So it was very difficult. And I always make it a point to be available to everyone anytime that I can. And I hope that everyone else in media will do this also, because like you said, this is how you get to meet people. And this is how you get to A, make new relationships, and B, kind of get introduced to new audiences. And there is nothing bad that comes from being available to new people and
Exactly.
sharing your information and their information and putting it together. And I really appreciate that, because you had come to me through a mutual friend of ours. So networking at its finest. So I appreciate that that you reached out to me and invited me on the show. I'm happy to do it. Happy to do it anytime.
I appreciate it. And you never know. I mean, if you're in San Diego or LA, I know the best taco places. So if you ask me, hey, what's the best taco place? I got you. So you don't even have to worry about that. So there you go. I got your back when it comes to all that.
Well, I got a date with the OC soon. So
there you go.
I'll look you up.
There you go. Patrick, thank you so much again for joining What's Up Bullets, and we appreciate your time.
My pleasure.